With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you.
One thing optometry has been missing is a unified message that explains the importance of eye care. Now, OYE Broadcasting has solved that dilemma. We're excited to announce this content delivery service that is designed to expand and enhance your practice and grow the industry of optometry as a whole. Please visit oybroadcasting.com for more information and sign up today.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kerry Gelb, and I want to say thank you for supporting the Open Your Eyes podcast. Our reach and growth was tremendous in 2021, thanks to our amazing guests, sponsors, and loyal audience. We look forward to bringing you more riveting interviews in 2022. Now, please enjoy the best of podcast highlights of 2021. So I want to start with, is there a difference between the brain and the eye? And is it one? Is it the same? If you could explain that from someone who does research in this area.
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the retina is part of the brain. It's the seeing part of the brain. It's the part of our central nervous system. And, you know, of course, when I began my research now 2 decades, over 20 years ago, we began our project on macular degeneration and how nutrition was related. What we've seen over the last number of years is that by measurements we do in the retina, we can learn about what's happening in the brain. So for example, when we measure macular pigments correctly in our research facility, we're getting a measure of the concentration of the macular carotenoids, the macular nutrients that are there. What we've seen, and this was a great work done out of Tufts University, Professor Liz Johnson's laboratory, they were able to actually show us that the amount of these pigments in the living eye correlates to the same nutrients working and stored in the human brain. So now optometry and eye care and these measurements is uniquely placed to function as a biomarker of brain nutrition. So add into that we know that these nutrients are good. Therefore, if we can measure them, see who's high, see who's low, and make lifestyle modifications and maybe supplementation to enhance retinal health, we now also know that this is really good for cognitive health, cognitive functions. And our recent work, Kerry, as you'll know, has been very impactful in terms of, you know, even helping people with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Not just from the cognitive piece. I think when we look at vision and when we look at what our work has been able to achieve, we need to understand what we're actually measuring. It's not as crude as just saying visual acuity or even contrast sensitivity. It's what those measures of vision or cognition mean for the quality of our life. And that's very individual to the individual, if you like. So for example, if we take a young, healthy, high performance sports athlete or someone that's in the military or someone that uses high performance visual related or cognitive related performances, subtle improvements in visual functions and cognitive functions for that population is extremely important. But go to the other extreme. And when we look at people, and we've been, you know, had the great pleasure of working in the area of dementia and Alzheimer's disease for the last 6-7 years now. And when you look at what it means to patients and to their carers, their loved ones, the people that have the time with these individuals, if you can do anything important to help with their quality of life, well, this makes it all worthwhile. And I really, really want to, you know, empower optometry to think in this way, that the work that we can do with lifestyle, nutrition, and optimizing those extends way beyond that of a basic measure of visual function. It's the impact on the quality of life and the performance. We're creating new standards for what's acceptable for vision.
Let's talk about cognitive function. Now, how can we use the eye as a biomarker toward cognitive function?
So, well, there's a couple of things. I mean, one of the key measures that we see, you know, in some of the published studies Professor Stringham, for example, has done a lot of work with CFFs, which we measure in the retina, okay? And this is an absolutely brilliant indicator of cognitive function. And it correlates beyond that of just that measure of retinal processing speed, or this links into attention, memory, reaction time. What I would say is that when we look at kind of these age-related diseases, such as age-related macular degeneration and Alzheimer's disease, by enhancing our sensitivities of measurement, by stepping out of the measurement of acuity, for example, and moving into other measures of visual performance, what we're seeing is that we're learning much more about vision and visual performance for people before diseases even affect them. So, for example, let's take cataract as an example. Typically, a patient will come into the eye doctor and you'll see that their acuities are fine, right? And you may say, look, I'm going to let it for a year or 2 years. Now, in that same patient, if you were to measure their contrast sensitivities, you'd start to see the contrast sensitivity measures decreasing to, or being suboptimal, if you like. And so what I'm saying here is that the other measures of vision can be indicators of, quality of life, performance, or even retinal disease years before those diseases even present themselves. And this, of course, we must look at diseases like macular degeneration and Alzheimer's disease in the same family, if you like. When you look at the risk factors for these conditions, they're almost identical, to be perfectly honest. And of course, a big player in that is our genetics. But our genetics is not something we can change in the current time. It is something that we change in the future, of course. So what do I mean by that? By good lifestyle today, we can change the genetics of the future for our offspring, for example, or this whole concept of epigenetics. But the point being, in today's world, and for the patient that sits in your chair today, you must look at what's modifiable for them today. And there's very little actually that you can change. I mean, if we look back to my own PhD, which is 20 years old now, that research question was, well, what is it about age-related macular degeneration and this nutritional pigment, macular pigment, which I've been studying all my life? And what we did was we wanted to look at where there are commonalities between the risk factors of the disease macular degeneration and determinants of macular pigment. So what do I mean by that? So when you look at a patient with age-related macular degeneration, we know that the established risk factors are their age. There's nothing you can change about that. Their genetics. There's nothing you can change about that. Cigarette smoking is a big one. We all know this. We have to advise our patients not to smoke cigarettes. But next in line is really nutritional optimization. And the point being, when you look at this risk factor as an established risk factor, subtle modifications there can have a major impact on the time at which the patient is going to be hit by this age-related eye disease. So essentially, you can push out the age. And remarkably, in my PhD from all those years ago, what we showed very clearly was that these risk factors, age, family history, cigarette smoking, and nutrition, were the exact major predictors of the pigment. So in other words, young, healthy people like you and me, okay, without retinal diseases, when we characterize ourselves in terms of those risk factors, those who smoke cigarettes, those who had the family history of the condition, for example, and typically led bad lifestyles, their macular pigment levels were very, very suboptimal. And this is really important because it's in tune with the entire hypothesis that we speak about. It's what we do throughout our lifetime that's going to impact on whether we're going to get the disease or not. And that's something that I really like to talk to optometrists about, because what we need to do is move away from eye care and medicine that waits until the problem presents before we do something to optimize or modify or reduce our risk of that. Now, I know that's challenging, particularly in ophthalmology, where time, and in optometry, where time is a problem. People simply don't have it. But if we make time for this, optometry can absolutely lead the way to make changes during a person's life that gives them better vision today We're going to create a better world of visual, a new standard of vision. But the really good news thereafter is that we're going to reduce the risk of these age-related conditions such as macular degeneration and Alzheimer's disease. You know, remember, if we all live long enough, we will all develop age-related macular degeneration. So age is great. It's a great success of modern time, aging population, but it's also the biggest challenge we have. And really, you know, eye care is fundamentally key to how we can positively impact on that. Hence why I'm really pleased to, like, you know, participate on events like this or educational seminars across America, because I do think that North America is leading the way. North America optometry, you have your champions there that are really setting the example, because the industry is changing greatly, and people see this, and patients see this, by the way. You know, I don't look at optometrists anymore the way I used to, which was, you know, people that will give you spectacles if you needed spectacles because you have a refraction problem. No, that's not what this is about. Optometry equals the first line of eye care, and I know you know this yourself from your great work with Open Your Eyes and what's coming with your great documentary. It's the indicator and the work that we can do early on to really help our patients in real time.
Now, if you go over the different types of macular degeneration, dry and wet, and are they a continuation of each other?
Yeah, so you know, it's a good question. So the easiest way to explain it is just it's really in the terminology. So the dry kind is changes of atrophy, whereas the wet kind is where there's abnormal blood vessels that bleed. And what patients oftentimes ask is, well, do I have the good kind or the bad kind? And the reality is there's really no good kind of macular degeneration. The only good kind is when you catch it really early before it's bothering you and we can do something about it. So are they a continuum? So in dry macular degeneration, there's a number of different levels or stages that eye doctors use to classify what level it's at. And the different levels of dry macular degeneration are a continuum. There's kind of an end stage of dry macular degeneration where it becomes very atrophic. And there's really just big kind of chunks of the macula that are no longer functioning. And that actually, by genetics, is a little bit different and is different than the people that develop wet macular degeneration. So although it all appears to be a continuum of the same process, genetically there's differences between the end stage of dry macular degeneration and of wet macular degeneration.
That's an interesting point when we talk about genetics, because before 1900, there was almost no cardiovascular disease, cancer, macular degeneration. So what has changed over the last 100 or so years? Has our genetics changed, or why are we getting these chronic degenerative diseases?
Yeah, so, you know, has our genetics changed? Maybe a little, but probably not enough to explain the dramatic change in all these chronic diseases that you're mentioning. And, you know, I think what I would tell you, I think, and what a lot of literature really backs up, is it really has to do with lifestyle, changes in lifestyle. That as in general, as a society, we're not as active. We don't eat as well. The foods that we eat aren't even of the same quality that they were 100 years ago. So, you know, if you took vegetables that were grown in a field 100 years ago and compare the nutrients that were in them compared to the nutrients that are grown in the same field today, because of over farming, there's far less nutrition in it. So it's lifestyle and some of the changes that have occurred over time, basically because of that lifestyle, that's really driving these chronic diseases.
Now, macular degeneration, according to the studies, is really underdiagnosed. And why do you think it's underdiagnosed? Now that our technology and eye care, you know, eye doctors have this incredible technology to be able to view the macula in microns, why are we still underdiagnosing it?
Yeah. So, you know, so you're right. There was a publication about 3 years ago that really pointed this out. And what this publication said was, what they did was they went out to eye doctors, optometrists and ophthalmologists, and said, we want you to examine patients over the age of 60 And all we want you to do is tell us, do they have macular degeneration, yes or no? And then, by the way, take a picture of the inside of their eye so that we can judge you. So basically, doctors were said, all you got to do is one thing, and Big Brother's watching over your shoulder, so you better try and do a good job. Even with those instructions, about 25% of the time, macular degeneration was missed. So that's the study you're referring to, and it really was astounding when it was published. And so the realities of everyday practice is that when we're seeing patients, we're not being asked just one singular question. We're being asked dozens, if not hundreds of questions. You know, are there cataracts? Is there glaucoma? Do they need glasses? And all these things. And so I think that oftentimes subtleties are missed. I think that, you know, right or wrong, I think that's what's happening is subtleties are very oftentimes missed, and oftentimes advanced technology is not being employed to help get the answer. And so I think that's what's leading to it. And but it really is, it's real, it's a big deal. And because as we already discussed, the earlier you find something, the better chance you have of having really good outcomes.
Let's talk about advanced technology, about retinal photography, retinal imaging, to be able to pick up subtle changes of the macular. What is out there that the eye physician has at their disposal to be able to do a better job to help find these very early changes of the macula?
Yeah, so Carrie, I think you and I have probably been practicing about the same amount of time, and the advances in technology have just been so incredible, what we have at our disposal today versus not too long ago. And so where I start with that is every patient that I see over age 60, I test their dark adaptation, what we were mentioning earlier. And so for my patients over 60, that's not a choice. That's just part of the deal. That's part of what we do, because I know that that's the most sensitive way to be able to pick up macular degeneration. So for me, that's number one. But some of the other technologies that are used, you mentioned retinal photography. So, you know, imagine taking a picture of yourself or of your family. What we have the capability of doing is taking a picture of the inside of your eye. And so it gives us a stationary, high resolution, manipulatable image to be able to take a very close look. And then I think and there's different types of retinal photography. Some of the different imaging units use different modes, multimodal. So it essentially is able to give us different layers. So it's not just even though it's just a flat image, it's able to dissect the different layers of the retina. And then another really big one is something called OCT, ocular coherence tomography. And the way that I describe that to patients is it's like having an ultra fine-tuned ultrasound. So it's so fine-tuned that it's able to see things that are 2, 3, 4 microns in size, to be able to see, are there some of the subtle changes that could be from macular degeneration or something else. And I think those are, for me at least, those are the main technologies for detecting macular degeneration. There's all sorts of even lower tech technologies. So even things like checking what's called your contrast sensitivity. Are you able to see things that aren't necessarily black and white or shades of gray? It's not as sensitive, but oftentimes people with macular degeneration have subtle changes to their vision that are important to pick up.
Let's talk about how common macular degeneration, the epidemiology within the U.S., worldwide.
Yeah. So again, just speaking from my experience in doing a clinical study on this. So in patients, I did a study of 100 consecutive patients that were over age 60, that I thought everything looked normal on their clinical exam. I even did the OCT, the instrument that I mentioned earlier, and that was normal. 40% of them failed the dark adaptation testing. So that means 40% of my patients over 60 that look like everything's normal actually have subclinical or very, very early macular degeneration. And what we know is as we get older, odds go up. And so my numbers of 40% were of all my patients above age 60. And so if we were to break it down into different age groups, we'd find that, 60 to 70 is lower than 70 to 80, which is lower than 80 to 100. So I would contend that any of the published numbers as far as prevalence of macular degeneration far underreported because there's so many people that are being missed.
And the key thing is, what can we do about it? But we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Let's talk about some of the other signs of some of the other technology, like retinal photography. If you have multispectral imaging or one of these technologies that you could pick up and you could look at the retina in microns, 10 microns, 15 microns. One of the earliest signs is something called drusen. Explain what drusen is and how that's important, not only in macular degeneration, but it also may be a sign of other systemic disease.
Yeah. So drusen are these little buildups that accumulate in the retina. And so what happens in very, very early macular degeneration is we get deposits in a couple different layers of cholesterol-like material. And what basically creates these deposits is when we don't have good in and out flow in and out of the retina. And then we start getting these little deposits of, it's essentially almost like waste material, metabolic waste. And so we get these little deposits that then start to grow. And so they start out just pinpoint, tiny, tiny, tiny. And then they start getting a little bit larger until we can ultimately then see them clinically. And so these drusen can accumulate, can eventually lead to some decrease in vision, whether it's your contrast sensitivity or how big or small is something you could see. But again, as I mentioned, a part of these deposits are accumulation of cholesterol. So as we can imagine, it has, that has something to do with cholesterol, has something to do with systemic care. So yeah, it really is all related. The blood that flows through the eyes is the same as the blood that flows through the rest of the body. And so we need to assume that when there's inflammation or disease or illness elsewhere, that we're much more likely to have the same in the eye. What I always tell people is sick eyes generally happen in sick people. And so if you see sick eyes, then we need to really look harder systemically and see what else is going on, whether our patients know about it or not.
One thing optometry has been missing is a unified message that explains the importance of eye care. Now, OYE Broadcasting has solved that dilemma. We're excited to announce this content delivery service that is designed to expand and enhance your practice and grow the industry of optometry as a whole. Please visit oiebroadcasting.com for more information and sign up today.
I notice now that the catchers a lot of times will use nail polish or tape their fingers so the pitchers can see the signs a little bit better. Is that an issue where the pitcher is having trouble seeing because they're only 60 feet away, 60 feet 6 inches, or is it just because they're trying to hide the sign so much from the other team?
Yeah, so I've had the problem of not being able to see as well at nighttime. So during the day, no problem seeing the catcher's fingers as far as being a pitcher. And but at night, for some reason, the reflection of everything going on, it's so bright, and then you're looking into your catcher, whether it's kind of like a darkened tunnel where they're giving the signals, and it's kind of hard to see. It's like this dark area. So occasionally I'll tell my catcher if I can't see their fingers, like, can you put nail polish or can you put tape, like white tape, so you can see, and it kind of just helps so much. It's not usually the distance, it's just basically on the lighting of the day, or some lights are better than others, or depending on how the field is faced or anything like that, kind of like a preference. But the tape and everything like that helps so much for a pitcher to see.
How many different pitches do you throw?
Oh man, so back when I was like 15 or 16, I had like ridiculous amount. I had like 7 or 8 pitches. I don't even know how I did that, but now I have 4. I kind of simplified everything and modified it, and now I have a fastball, changeup, slider, and a palm ball. So that's basically what I got going on right now. I used to have like 2 palm balls, another curve ball, a splitter. So it was a lot, and my catchers, they kept up. So we're kind of running out of fingers for signals. We had to be really creative with it.
And how do you give the signal so the other team doesn't steal the signs? How often do you have to change the signs during the day?
When I was growing up, yeah, like my dad had the most simple signs ever. It was like 1, you know, too. It was like, it was so simple. And he'd be like, this would be inside and this one thing would be outside, and it would be so easy. And people would try to pick the signs up all the time. People would call out like, she's throwing a change up, and we'd be like, okay, you know, it's just whatever. But now on like USA and stuff like that, we have like such a system where, you know, everything is relayed, or we have like, they have like sticker or bands over here where they look up the numbers, and it's very secretive, and we don't really have a problem with it normally ever. But yeah, growing up, it was like everyone was picking up my signs and we didn't care. We're like, whatever, you can know what's coming, you're still not gonna hit it.
So now, I mean, when they start changing the signs, does it get complicated where people have trouble remembering, you know, we're in this sequence or we're in that sequence?
Not really. I mean, right now, I have a catcher that I've had for so long that we kind of have like, we're on the same page like all the time. So we're never really confused with that. If we have to change something here and there, like sometimes it gets confusing when there's a runner on second, and you don't want them to pick off, you know, a sign or anything like that. We got to change things up a little bit. But for the most part, I mean, we haven't really had any problems with anyone stealing them.
So talk to me about the mental part of the game. How important is that in baseball?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say if you're not good mentally, you can't be a pitcher. There's too much going on in your head that you need to basically calm down all the voices and the nerves and everything like that. You got to concentrate on your breathing and everything like that. Because if you're too tense and everything like that, you're not going to throw strikes. The balls are going to go everywhere. People are going to get hit. So mentally, you just have to calm everything down. And what helped me growing up is I saw a movie called For the Love of the Game. And he gets on the mound, and you know, it's crazy crowds, and he says, clear the mechanism. And it basically just shuts everything out. You get in your zone. And when you really think about it, you're just throwing it. I know everyone says it, just throw the glove, just throw the catcher's glove. But really, I shouldn't be looking to see if Bryce Harper's up against me, because if I think that, you know, he's going to hit a home run off me, then he is. So basically just hitting my spots. And if things go wrong, like, you have to have a short memory. You have to be like Dory on Nemo, like just forget about what happened. Like if someone gets a hit or someone makes it, especially if someone makes an error, because that really hurts. You got to just brush it off and just get after the next batter, because if you don't brush it off, guarantee the next batter is going to get a hit, and then it's going to be a, you know, a merry-go-round. So you just got to go after the next batter. You can always tell, like, with certain pitchers, if you get after them in the first couple innings, you go, oh, we're in their head, they're done. Send them, you know, bring in the bullpen, because you can tell when someone, their body language and everything is frustrated. So yeah, just basically showing no emotion to anybody.
Talk about the side effects of intermittent fasting as far as brain fog, energy. How does it help us?
So the pathophysiology of it is pretty fascinating. And again, I reference Dr. Mattson a lot. He describes it as when we stress our body out just enough, it becomes more resilient. It doesn't induce damage. So it's the same concept of resistance training and exercise. When you stress your muscles out just enough, certainly we can damage our muscles if we overlift or push too hard too fast, you know, and cause tearing of muscle fiber. But when you stress it out enough, the body will respond by becoming more resilient. The practice of daily intermittent fasting seems to stress cells out just enough, where they build internal mechanisms through changes in DNA and changes in protein synthesis, that they become more resilient to disease. Now, the brain fog, it turns out, when you are in the fasted state and you have burned through all of the carbohydrates floating through your blood from the last meal and the glycogen stored in your liver, and your body shifts to burning fat for fuel because that's all that's available, your brain actually works better on ketone bodies than it does on burning on burning glucose for fuel. You think faster, clearer. That's where most of our students come back when they're fasted. And for most, it's the morning, but not everyone. And they're like, I'm a boss in the morning. I'm getting my work done. I've got my checklist. Because they just think so much clearer while they're fasted.
Since you brought up ketone bodies, I have to ask you, and I know people ask you this all the time about the keto. Mm-hmm. How's your diet different than the keto diet?
Is your
diet the keto diet?
I get that 1,000 times a day. So I knew about keto when I developed Galveston diet, roughly. I hadn't really done a deep dive. And I get asked how I compare to 1,000 other programs because there's that many out there. I stay in my lane. I pretty much know what I know. I research what I've got. I don't purposefully look at other people's programs because I never want to be biased. I never want to get caught in that trap of, ooh, that's a good idea. Let me borrow this. I just stay where I am. So as far as how we compare to keto, the way most people do keto, the way I understand it, is really, you will lose weight. The data on fast, quick weight loss is actually really good, but it's not sustainable. You know, people have a really difficult time, most regular people, in sustaining that low of a carbohydrate intake for that long. There's social reasons, there's emotional reasons, you know, it's difficult to do. And then when they add those carbs back in, they gain the weight back plus then some. So it's really hard to sustain. Your inflammation levels, the way most people practice ketosis, will go up dramatically because you are not feeding your body with the complex carbohydrates, the natural anti-inflammatories, the fiber. You're missing all of that. So I call it weight loss at any cost, which is just not something I'm willing to teach people how to do. So will you ever be in ketosis in a weight loss program? Yeah, you develop ketone bodies every time you burn fat for fuel. And in order to lose fat, you have to burn it. So, but we don't check ketones. We don't care if you're in ketosis. That is not the goal of our program. And a lot of people confuse fasting with ketosis. You may hear from Dr. Fung or other people, and I'm not knocking what he does. I did read his book, The Obesity Code. You may knock yourself out. You may not knock yourself out of ketosis if you do 50 calories or add this to your coffee or whatever, but you will break your fast. And we focus on fasting, not ketosis in our program.
You brought up before a cheat day. A lot of bodybuilders, you know, their Sunday will be their cheat day and eat pizza or whatever they're going to eat. I find that if I do that with myself and a lot of my patients, what happens is they become addicted again to these foods. So it's not so much that if they eat it once in a while, it's bad. It's just that they're addicting these foods and then they become re-addicted to the foods. Explain why you think that a cheat day doesn't work.
I absolutely agree. One is, my daughter is studying to become a registered dietitian right now. She's in university for that. And, she talks about, Mama, food does not have a morality. They learn that in her undergrad's nutrition science. She said, food is not good or bad. Certainly food is more nutritious or less inflammatory or whatever labels we would put on it. But when we put the good and bad label and you're allowing yourself to eat bad food, that becomes an emotional thing with food. And like you said, you become re-addicted. And so, we don't allow our students to beat each other up when they make a more inflammatory choice. We just say every day's a new day, start over. Look, we also address the emotional components of this. Like, look at the reasons why you did that day. We're not, you're not allowing yourself to do this or that. You're an adult making a decision that you feel like is best for you. And, we often, all of us, me included, fall back on old habits and behaviors when things get rough. And, tomorrow's a new day. When you slash a tire, when you get a flat tire, don't slash the other three, is what I tell people. And what I find when you allow yourself a cheat day, when you're giving yourself permission to make inflammatory choices, then you are slashing the other three tires rather than just one from one bad day.
So a lot of people feel that you should eat every 2 hours. That was popular for a while. And I think some bodybuilders feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between eating every 2 hours and doing intermittent fasting? And what's the downside of eating every 2 hours?
It's hard for me to speak to the downside of it. I was, in medical school, we talked about that being a good thing, but it turns out there really aren't any studies to support that it was a good idea. It seemed to make sense, but we didn't really have studies that showed that was really helpful in a whole lot of ways. So the thought process was it kept your blood sugar stable. You didn't have the drops, but really the most effective way to drop your blood sugar is to eat a lot of processed and simple sugars that dramatically raise your blood sugar quickly and cause a compensatory immediate rise in insulin, which then bottoms you out. And so fasting gets rid of this. When we look at the data coming out of, there's a great study where they were obese pre-diabetic, I believe, patients who were put on isocalorimetric diets. So they were matched, groups were matched, male, female, age, weight, whatever, 2 groups. Group A was put on intermittent fasting. So they ate the exact same thing in an 8-hour window. And then the other group was eat on demand. And they measured multiple things. The weight loss was similar, maybe a little bit more in the fasted group, but fasting's not a great way to lose weight. You know, it's great for inflammation, but not so much for weight loss, because you can eat a lot and a lot of bad stuff. I said the bad word, here I go. You eat a lot of inflammatory things in your window, but they were eating the exact same thing. The fasted people had decreasing systemic inflammation levels, you know, they also had decreased abdominal circumference. So their visceral fat levels were lower than the people who ate on demand. So it's the practice of fasting in itself that will help lower your systemic inflammation levels. And they think because your insulin levels are lower and your fasting glucose levels are lower when you practice fasting. That's theoretical, that hasn't been proven yet. And that your same thing, the visceral fat is directly related to your systemic inflammation levels. When you lower that, you stop driving so much fat to the viscera.
Talk about inflammation. That's just the second part of your program.
Mm-hmm.
Why is inflammation bad, and what can we do to keep inflammation low?
Ooh, so chronic inflammation is kind of like high blood pressure. You know, you don't, unless it's super high, you have no idea you have it. You're just walking around living your life, doing your thing, but it's just chipping away at your organs. Chronic inflammation does the same thing. You really don't feel that bad when you're chronically inflamed. You would just have a general sense of unease. This is kind of achy, or just not feeling exactly right, but you can't put your finger on it, kind of thing, while it is wreaking havoc on your end organ systems slowly but surely. Things that you can do, you know, to lower chronic inflammation are almost all nutrition based and stress release. So cortisol is a huge driver here, and to lower cortisol, almost every way to do it is anti-inflammatory nutrition and things that relieve stress in your body. Meditation, journaling, you know, whatever works for you, going for a walk, talking to a friend. It's a little bit different for everyone, but really it's all the self-care, me time. It's huge. It's biochemical, and it really does help. The other is filling your body with things that naturally fight inflammation. In the Galveston diet, we talk about eating the rainbow, trying to eat as many colors as possible, because each of those colors represents a different phytochemical that is a natural anti-inflammatory or antioxidant. So anthocyanins in colorful fruits and vegetables, lignans in fruits and nuts. And really avoiding the things we know cause inflammation: nitrites, artificial colors, artificial flavors, and processed carbohydrates are some of the most pro-inflammatory things that we can put in the body.
And how about omega-3s? Are they helpful?
Yes, they're very helpful, and Americans just aren't getting enough of them. The way most people eat in the Western world and the Western diet is a diet that's really rich in omega-6 fatty acids, and we do that's an essential fatty acid. We do need it, but we're eating probably 20 times more than we should be, because so much of the processed foods has corn oil or soybean oil, which is super high in omega-6. So we're getting way too much of that. Omega-3s, we're not eating a lot of fish. Daughter. We're not eating a lot of the fatty fish. We're not eating a lot of the flax and the chia seeds and the things that are rich in omega-3. So at the cellular level, the cell membranes are made up of the omega-3s basically get deposited in the cell wall as a phospholipid. And the body, when it's going through its processes, just pulls whatever phospholipid is available and breaks it down. So if you're eating a diet rich in omega-6, you have more of that deposited in the cell wall, more available as a substrate. And so when those broken down, the breakdown products of omega-6 in excess are pro-inflammatory, whereas the breakdown of omega-3s are anti-inflammatory.
What kind of protein do you recommend that people eat? Can they eat grass-fed steak? Is that on your program?
So whatever works for you. If you have a personal preference, you know, certainly we know that shellfish and fish can be more anti-inflammatory, mostly because of the richness in omega-3. But, you know, everything in moderation. And in Galveston Diet, we talk about when we're making protein choices that are animal-based, let's look at the saturated fat. Okay, so lean is a little bit better because you have less saturated fat. Not that all saturated fat is bad, but you need to balance your saturated with your unsaturated fat. You need to be eating more. Our goal is just try to get more unsaturated than saturated fat. You know, in our house, we enjoy beef, fish, chicken, some pork here and there. But really, we're always balancing that with olive oil, with nuts, with seeds, with, omegas as much as we can.
Fitting multifocal contact lenses presents a big opportunity to meet patient needs while growing your practice. Alcon is your partner not only with our innovative portfolio, but through e-learning. Learn to enhance your multifocal strategy today with the Alcon Experience Academy.
Since I bought Safe for You, my dad makes me clean his boat.
Es natural y es un buen producto.
Every time I go back to school, my mom always makes sure that I have my Safe for You products. I bring extra, and my roommates certainly don't mind.
It's a good thing I had Safe for You to clean up after this little guy.
When my hands get dry, I like to wash them with Safe for You.
And most importantly, the reason why I buy Safe for You is because it's safe for me and you.